gosh, lightning's everywhere. That really looks like a funnel to me. Okay, so this is truly the sketchiest thing. I cannot drive under that. It's ready to go tornadic. I want to time lapse this, but I don't want to die. This is the storm that's north of where Reed is. It's coming this way. 7 is right up in front of me somewhere. And then I'm gonna see if I get on the other side and keep shooting this as it billows out. Look at this swoop. God, whoa! Time to get in the car. On my way to make a stop at Walmart, get some milk and junk, and then I'm gonna head straight out and try to make it to New Mexico by 11 or 12 tonight. In May of 2023, I took off for what would become a 3-week storm-chasing trip through the Midwest. I was, perhaps, a bit more cautious on this trip as I was driving a new 2022 all-wheel drive Sienna camper van, which had been lifted and outfitted with all-terrain tires. Since it was new, I was very motivated to shy away from softball-sized hail, and I was hoping to avoid having to replace a very expensive windshield. I had seen many images of storm chaser vehicles that were completely battered after only one season, so I was hoping to get to the end of my trip with the new vehicle still intact. During my 3 weeks of chasing, I would be camping in truck stops, visiting my sister who lives in Bentonville, Arkansas, and occasionally checking into a motel to get cleaned up.
Continue for 107 miles.
I am heading south from Amarillo towards Childres. There's a HRRR shows like a discrete supercell down there a little bit later today, and that's the same area that the weather services have a 5% chance of tornadoes. So between Childres and Wichita Falls, I think that's what I'm looking at. I hit the ground running for the 2023 storm season with a tornado warning near Childres, Wichita Falls, and Seymour, Texas. Reed Timmer was the only other chaser in the area that I knew of, and he was in position to get some footage, but if there was a tornado, it was rain-wrapped and didn't stick around long enough. By the time I caught up to the cell, it was well ahead of me, leaving me with some striking footage of the back-end lightning going off as a full moon came out from behind the clouds. It's Friday, Cinco de Mayo, and it's about 3:30. Heading west towards a town called, was it? Moore? Mound. No, Moody. After spending the night in the parking lot of Texas Best Smokehouse in Henrietta, Texas, and after a Google Maps-induced nervous breakdown, I headed south, trying my best to get in position for the next big line of storms due to roll in south of Waco. I chased all afternoon without much happening until I arrived in the town of Llano just after sunset. I drove up to the edge of the storm with the tornado watch, but then lost my nerve as it was already dark and the radar was showing some pretty heavy rotation. Stayed a little too long. Still think it's taking its sweet time getting here, but I'm gonna get out of Dodge right now because I don't know, I'm not a meteorologist, but there's a hook. There's what looks like a hook, and there's all kinds of rotation. Like I've never been on a storm yet that's been that red and that green right next to each other with a hot spot like that. And maybe I don't know nothing, but I'm telling you, there's a hook. And the lightning bolts are getting closer and closer. So I'm just gonna roll back east and maybe a little south just to make sure I'm like out of the path of this thing. The tornado never showed up, which was good news for me since chasing tornadoes at night is not my thing. But I did manage to get out of the way before Llano was hit with golf ball sized hail. I headed to Fredericksburg and decided to call it a night. Another cool looking little town center building, courthouse, schoolhouse, something.
Continue on US 87 north for 4 miles.
Howitzer out front. Found a road. Gonna just kind of edge up on the storm a little bit and then bail. Coming up underneath the Anson storm, Hamilin. On May the 6th, the real action moved up towards Missouri, but I hung around as there was still a 2% chance of tornadoes. The real story in Texas seemed to be the large gorilla hail that was in the forecast. This was going to be a day of trying to get right up next to the storm without getting my van bashed in. It started with a large cell moving in just north of Abilene in the towns of Anson and Stamford. The sky repeatedly looked like it would drop a tornado, but the dynamics never really took off. I eventually hid under an abandoned gas station overhang, and the large hail missed me, but instead headed to the south of me with 3-inch softball-sized hail reported down near Brooksmith. So not much action, but a beautiful sunset before I headed off to find a truck stop, as the next day looked like it would be a long drive to the north. Stopped at Love's. Not sure how far it is to Oklahoma City. They changed the direction of everything tonight, so...
Turn left to merge onto I-44 east toward Oklahoma City.
Oh, I'm going to Grand Island now, Nebraska. Looks like the tornado area doesn't become active until after dark, which would have been good to know. On May the 7th, I took off from the Wichita Falls area where I had spent the night and headed north to Nebraska, as the forecast was now calling for severe weather with a slight chance of tornadoes in the late afternoon between Grand Island and Lincoln.
Welcome to Nebraska.
After a 571-mile drive, I arrived in Grand Island just as the storm I was looking at completely fell apart. One of the toughest things about storm chasing is that you can drive for 8 hours straight and arrive just in time to see everything disappear right in front of your eyes. I had given up for the day and was headed south again while cursing the HRRR for the blown forecast, when clouds suddenly appeared in front of me out of the clear blue sky. 15 minutes later, towers were going up just in front of me and just behind. This thing just showed up. Literally, there was nothing here 5 minutes ago. And it just exploded, and it's continuing to explode over my head. After checking my apps, I found that my first official tornado warning in several days had just gone up to the west of me, and I was directly in its path. As I turned to the west to chase the oncoming storm, it occurred to me that I only had about 30 minutes of daylight left. On top of that, the storm ran out of steam and the tornado warning disappeared. As I headed back down to Kansas, a new tornado warning went up just east of Lincoln on the Iowa border, and a tornado finally touched down in the dark as I was beginning to wonder if I was ever going to catch a break. Exhausted and with depression beginning to set in, I hunkered down at a truck stop outside of Salina, Kansas for the night. It's the sunrise Monday, May 8th. Spent the night at a pilot outside of Topeka, Kansas. On Monday, May the 8th, All of the action seemed to be moving to the south. Since the bottom corner of the severe weather was right over my sister's neighborhood in Bentonville, it was time to head south toward Arkansas for a visit. Heading south from Salina. Got up this morning at like 4:30, went to Starbucks, did some stuff, and now I'm just looking at the radar. It's not looking all that great for the area in Missouri that I wanted to shoot, so I'm going to go down here. If that dies away, I'll just take a look at what it's going to be like tomorrow. But on my way, it was really beginning to look like something big might happen by mid-afternoon in western Missouri. After a quick stop at Starbucks in Salina for some Wi-Fi, I was back on the road racing east for the Kansas-Missouri border. I ducked into a Walmart to grab some supplies and to take a nap as I could no longer keep my eyes open. And when I woke up, towers were exploding in front of me and it was time to roll. From Fort Scott, I headed east, caught the 49, and headed north, where a large supercell was blowing up just north of the town of Nevada. It was taking its time, so I started shooting time lapses while the huge storm continued to rumble slowly in my direction. After shooting for about an hour, the storm suddenly lurched to the south, and I backed away trying to stay in front of it. I headed slowly toward the town of Nevada, but kept pulling over to grab some shots as the storm began to look far more menacing as the minutes ticked by. I pulled off in the town of Nevada thinking I would take Route 54 to the west, but the storm was already right in front of me, cutting off the west option. As I drove, I began to panic a little bit as this was one of the creepiest skies that I had ever seen. Underlit by the setting sun, the sky was now literally boiling right above the town of Nevada as I drove quickly back to Interstate 49, hoping to get out of town before a tornado dropped down. The storm did its best to try to produce as a small funnel occasionally started to form, but the dynamics just weren't there. While the storm didn't produce a tornado, it definitely made up for it with lightning going off in all directions as the storm chased me all the way down to Arkansas. The sky was still lighting up as I pulled up to my sister's house in Bentonville and called it a night. Originally, I was planning to take it easy on the morning of May the 9th and spend time catching up with my sister in Bentonville. But after a quick look at the severe weather forecast, it was clear that I would be heading back to the west as quickly as possible, as an elevated storm risk was now in the forecast for most of Kansas, with a 5% chance of tornadoes stretching across a large swath of the eastern half of the state. On the not-so-great side, there was a 30% chance of large hail, which meant that I needed to be careful if I wanted the van to stay intact. I left Bentonville around noon and headed north toward Joplin before cutting across on Route 400. I started looking for a place to set up, but the storms flew up in front of me and formed a QLCS, which meant that my chance of a tornado was not that great, and more problematically, I would be on the wrong side if I wanted to catch the setting sun while trying to shoot a potential tornado. If I wanted any possibility of a good shot, I'd have to race across the front of the QLCS to get to the other side before getting clobbered by hail. Continuing to drive towards Wichita. See that wall cloud just cruising in hot. Skirting right in front of this thing. So black. Just to my immediate right. Just don't know how long it's going to take me to get off this thing when I get to the end of it. Or if I drive right through Wichita. If I can, I will. I gotta get on the other side of that thing right in front of me. I managed to just squeak by in front of the squall line before driving through Wichita and continuing on to a town called Pratt, just to the west. I pulled over to the south of Pratt as tornado watches went up on two cells that were headed right for me. I was looking at strong rotation as the cells merged and dumped quite a bit of hail on the town. The wind picked up, and for the second day in a row, I was really expecting a tornado to drop at any second. Just brought up radar scope, and this is the one right now that's rotating hard. this field. Trying to get some shots of lightning. My back over here as I come in. Keeping an eye on this hail core right in front of me. So that gets a little close. I'll make tracks out of here really fast. The sky is just fantastic. Right here. Look at the rotation right there. I'm just so transfixed.